Hello there, TikTok. Not gonna lie, this kind of feels like the good old days of 2008, back when YouTube used to have reply videos and people would send messages backwards and forwards and have proper discussions. I'm gonna enjoy this.
I don't think this person is going to listen, but perhaps someone else might. And it also gives me a reason to talk about why I care about who is writing the stories I'm reading, so here are some book recommendations while we talk.
Starting this off by assuming that I'm not being genuine, not a good step. I am going to listen. I'm not necessarily just going to agree with you, though. I'm going to actually form my own opinion, so I'm going to listen to you, and if you say something stupid, I'm going to dismiss it.
I'm going to start with an example. Someone climbs Mount Everest, they come back down and tell someone about their experience. Those two people go and write books, two separate books. Who do you think is going to tell the more authentic story? Now, I'm not saying authors shouldn't write outside of their lived experiences. Write whatever you want, I can't stop you. But from a reader's perspective, books written by those who have had only proximity to experiences are the ones being published more, the one who did not climb the mountain. And this has lots to do with people not caring about who is writing their stories. I want authenticity. I want raw and true stories. I want the person who climbed the mountain.
So, your analogy assumes that the person with black skin, or the person lacking a penis, is the one who climbs the mountain, and the person with white skin, who has a penis, doesn't climb the mountain. That's a pretty big presumption. What makes you assume that the white man doesn't have the experience they're writing? Do you even know which experience is being written about? Because your analogy falls apart.
But Abby, you are reading sci-fi and fantasy. What do you mean real-world experiences? Those genres have always been used as vessels to talk about real-world issues like racism, homophobia, oppression, sexism, ableism. Real-world experiences that real people have encountered.
Right, I'm going to blow your mind here, but real-world people experience racism, sexism, ableism, all of those things, yes. But they are not exclusive to non-white, non-male people. Slaves have existed for years and generations across many, many different places. In fact, the word slave derives from the word Slav, and the Slavs are white. So what you're saying makes no sense. You don't want authentic experiences. You want non-white, non-male experiences. Yes, now I'm calling you out.
Many authors are constantly fighting the very things they write about in the publishing industry.
Do you know what group of people are currently fighting in the publishing industry to get published the most? Because I'll tell you, it's straight white male conservatives. They almost never get published in the publishing industry at the moment because publishers openly state that they want identity politics, they want own voices, they actively push non-white and non-male voices more than anything else at the moment, because this is all part of the pandering woke agenda that has been happening across multiple different industries, the publishing industry being one of the biggest that's doing this. This is why you see so many books pandering to racial identity, to gender identity, to sexuality. These things are rife across the publishing industry. The vast majority of straight white male conservative voices now have to go through either small independent publishers or they have to publish through self-publishing because the larger publishing houses just won't touch them. What this effectively means is you claim you want people who are pushing back against what you claim is oppression. There is no oppression against non-white, non-male authors in the publishing industry. This hasn't been the case for a generation, because no one in their right mind would refuse to publish someone because they were a black woman, or a Hispanic woman, or an Asian woman. This doesn't happen. If you think it does, I want evidence of this.
A white person can write about those themes, and many have. Straight, white, able-bodied authors have been profiting off of others' experiences for decades, and they will continue to. And I'm not saying that people like that don't have something to offer. I just want to see more balance in the publishing industry. That's only going to happen by people reading diversely. Also, please, can one of these white authors write about oppression from the oppressor's point of view? That's a story I want to read.
Oh, wow. Way to just wear your racism and your sexism on your sleeve there. So the white men have to be the oppressor. All white men are oppressors. Is that what you're trying to say? By the way, they have done. If you want a recommendation, try reading Shadow of the Conqueror by Shad M. Brooks. That's literally a book about a white oppressor trying to figure out whether or not he can be forgiven, whether or not he's worthy of forgiveness for being one of the worst oppressors in his world. It is a fantasy steampunk world. He is literally the white oppressor you want to read about. I guarantee you're not going to read that book, though, are you? Because you don't actually want it. You don't want to read diversely. You want to virtue signal.
I see someone's skin color, their disability, their gender, anything that can key me in on their lived experiences when deciding what to read. Because yes, I research nearly every author before I read their stories.
That's really quite sad if you do that. You research every author before you read their stories, which means that you assume that fiction isn't fiction. You assume it's semi-autobiographical. I have written multiple stories. I have written 3 novels which I've yet to have published. In all 3 of them, I write non-white, non-male characters, and in all of them, I write able-bodied characters. I am a very heavily disabled white man. I do not write about disabled white men. That's not what my writing is about. I write sci-fi and fantasy books. And in those books, I imagine what it's like to be in other people's shoes, because that's what the purpose of fiction is. It's imagination. Do you know what else I write? I write fantasy races and fantasy scenarios. I write entire species that can't possibly exist. There's an entire race of magical squid people in my world. Do you know what? There are no such thing as magical squid people. You cannot get that perspective in reality.
White people are still part of diversity. As much as you may think I'm trying to push them out, I'm not. Many of the LGBTQ books I've recommended are from white authors. But like Booktok, diversity has layers. While a white author may be gay, they will always be white first. Layers.
That's a great way to admit that the only time you consider white men is when they're not straight. So straight white men are what you're pushing out. You're not pushing out white men. Okay, you'll allow white men so long as they suck a little bit of cock. So does that mean because I'm bisexual, you would be willing to read my book? Because, I'm not a straight white man, I'm just a white man. So does that make me less deserving of being ignored? Because apparently, because other white men were privileged generations ago, I have their inherited privilege. Is that how it works? You're a racist, a sexist, and a panderer. And you are using sexuality and diversity as an excuse to virtue signal. That is what you're doing.
I'm still learning every day. It's a blast. So you can continue to ignore who is telling your stories, but you are not only doing yourself a great disservice, but literature suffers from your way of thought as well, because we're not getting the most authentic stories we can. Because let me ask you this, would you prefer to be colorblind, or would you rather see the world in all its glorious color?
Personally, I prefer to read decent literature. I don't care about race. I don't care about the colour of people's skin. Also, I have read some of the books that you've held up, and they have been almost exclusively shit. My God, some of the books you held up were some of the worst books I've ever read. If this is what you think is the next step in literature, I feel sorry for the future generations, because your taste in books is absolutely terrible. The only reason you are reading those books is because they are by non-white, non-male authors. That's the only reason. You read terrible, trite garbage because you want a virtue signal. That's what you're doing. I listened. You have exposed yourself as the absolute bigot I thought you were. Congratulations.